Longman Classics. Robin Hood. Robin Hood and Little John.
Robin Hood was the best bowman in England, and he could fight very well with a sword. There was one other weapon that he could use better than most other men. That weapon was the quarterstaff. It was a yeoman's weapon, but Robin didn't always carry one. One day, Robin was looking for deer in the forest. He had his sword at his side, his good bow in his hand, and arrows at his back. He saw some deer on the far side of a little river. There was a bridge over the river, but it was only a metre wide, and a man was standing on it. He was a very big man, much more than 2 meters tall, and he had a strong quarterstaff. Robin came to the end of the bridge, but the tall man didn't move. "Good morning, friend," Robin Hood said. "I want to get to the other side of the river." The man said nothing, and he didn't move. Robin put an arrow to his bow, and he said, "Let me come over the bridge." "You're very brave," said the big man. "You with your bow and arrow, when I have only a staff." "Can you use your staff?" Robin asked. And he went to some young trees and cut a quarterstaff for himself. He left his bow and arrows on the ground and went back to the bridge. "We'll fight for the bridge," he said. "The one who falls into the river is the loser." "Ha ha ha ha! Yes," the big man laughed. "I love a fight, and I hope you love a bath." They started to fight. They were both very quick with their weapons. Each tried to hit the other, but each was very quick to stop the other's staff with his own staff. For an hour they fought, their staves moving very fast. Then, at last, Robin found an opening. His staff hit the big man on the head. Robin Hood started to laugh. Too soon. The big man's quarterstaff came down on Robin's staff so hard that it broke. The wood was too green. Robin's foot went over the side of the bridge, and he fell into the water. The big man looked down. "Are you hurt?" he called. "Do you want help?" But Robin wasn't hurt. As he climbed up the river bank, he was laughing. "That was a good fight," he said. "You're a strong man. Can I do anything for you?" "Yes," said the big man. "You can help me to find Robin Hood. I want to be one of his men." Robin Hood sounded his horn, and 20 men in Lincoln Green were soon at the bridge. Will Scarlet said, "You've been in the water, Robin. Did this man throw you in? Shall we throw him into the river, Robin?" "Robin," said the big man. "Are you Robin Hood? Have I hit Robin Hood with my quarterstaff? Will you forgive me? I didn't know." Robin Hood laughed again, and he told his men about the fight on the bridge. "He wants to be one of us," Robin said. "I like you. What is your name?" "My name is John Little." "Little?" said Robin, laughing because John was so big. "I think we'll call you Little John." So Little John went with Robin Hood and his men, They made a fire and dried Robin's clothes, and they cooked some good deer meat. Next morning, at Robin Hood's greenwood tree, Little John was given clothes of Lincoln green and the biggest bow from the outlaw's store. "I'll teach you to use the bow," said Robin Hood. "You'll soon be a very good bowman, because you're so strong and so tall."
Robin Hood and Sir Richard of the Lea.
A knight came riding through the forest trees in the greenwood. He rode like a poor man, on an old horse and in old clothes. Suddenly he heard, "Welcome, good knight. Welcome to the greenwood." The knight looked up. 2 yeomen in green clothes stood at his horse's head. They had arrows ready to shoot from their longbows. "Who are you?" the knight asked. The bigger man answered, "They call me Little John, and my friend here is Much the miller's son. We are Robin Hood's men." "I know about Robin Hood," said the knight. "He is a good man. He takes money from those who have a lot, but he gives it to the poor. He never takes anything from women or from good yeomen who work in the fields or in the forest." "That's right," Little John said. "And now, will you come with us? Robin is waiting for his dinner. He told us to find somebody to have dinner with him." "I wasn't going to have any dinner today," the knight said. "I'll come with you gladly." Little John and Much brought the knight to Robin Hood. "Welcome, Sir Knight," said Robin. "I am Sir Richard of the Lea," said the knight. "Then, Sir Richard, let us have dinner." It was a very good dinner. There was fish from the river, deer from the forest, as much as the knight could eat. "I haven't had a dinner like that for a long time, Robin," he said. "Thank you." "Do you want to pay something for it?" Robin Hood asked. "If you do, I can give food like that to other people, poor people." "I'd like to pay," said the knight, "but I don't have much money, only 1 piece of gold." Robin looked at him. "If that is all you have, I won't take it, and if you need more, you can have it. But Little John must see." Little John looked in the knight's bags. "It's right," he said. "The knight doesn't have more than 1 piece of gold." "Do you want to tell us why?" Robin asked. "Yes, Robin," said Sir Richard. "I had a son. He killed a knight. It was in a fair fight at the tournament field, but the proud Sheriff of Nottingham put my son in prison. To get him out of prison took all my money and more. I had to borrow." "You borrowed from your friends?" Robin said. "No. When I was rich I had friends. When I wanted money they all left me. I had to borrow from the rich abbot of the Abbey of St. Mary. I must pay him back 400 pieces of gold. If I can't pay him back the money tomorrow, he will take my castle and all my lands." Robin spoke to Little John. "Go to our hiding place, Little John, and get 400 pieces of gold. Sir Richard can borrow it from us." Little John counted out more than 400 pieces of gold. "Can't you count?" asked Much. This is the way to count money when a poor knight has to have it." They took the money to Robin Hood. "Robin," said Little John, "this man is a knight, but his clothes are very old. You must give him the right clothes for a knight. We have good green cloth." "Yes," said Robin, "give him 3 meters." Little John gave the knight 4 meters of Lincoln green cloth. Then he said, "And the knight must have a good horse, not the old one he came on." "Yes," said Robin Hood, "give him a good horse." Little John gave him Robin's best horse. Sir Richard of the Lea thanked Robin for all these things. "When must I pay back the money I am borrowing from you?" he asked. "In 1 year from today, if you can," said Robin, "under this greenwood tree. Now, go and pay the abbot. And a knight mustn't ride alone. Little John will go with you and help you."
Sir Richard pays the abbot.
"We must go to York," said Sir Richard of the Lea to Little John. "I must pay the abbot of St. Mary the 400 pieces of gold tomorrow, or he can take my castle and all my lands." The next day, the abbot was at dinner in the great hall of his abbey. The Sheriff of Nottingham and many other lords were with him. Sir Richard of the Lea and Little John came into the hall. The knight went down on his knee in front of the abbot and said, "Sir Abbot, I borrowed money from you, and today is the day that I must pay it back." "Have you brought the money?" asked the abbot, and he didn't look pleased. Sir Richard said nothing. "No," said the abbot, and he looked glad. "Then why have you come?" "Can I ask for more time to pay?" said the knight. "You say you are the servant of God, and in God's name I ask it." "No," said the abbot. "Your castle and lands are mine now." Sir Richard asked the sheriff and the other lords to help him. "No," they all said. "You have lost your castle and all your lands. Go away." The knight stood up. "I will pay you your money, and God will judge you, because you wanted to take my castle and my lands." He spoke to Little John, and John counted the 400 pieces of gold, one at a time, onto the table in front of the abbot. "1 piece for the abbot, the servant of God. 2 pieces for the abbot. 3 pieces for the abbot. 4, up to 400 pieces for the abbot, the servant of God." Then the knight and Little John went away. Sir Richard of the Lea went home in his new green clothes. His wife was waiting for him. "Have we lost everything?" she asked. "No," he said. "The castle and my lands are ours, but we must thank Robin Hood for that." The knight stayed in his castle and on his lands, and he worked hard every day. At last he had 400 pieces of gold. He said to his wife, "Now I have the money that I borrowed from Robin Hood, but I want to take him a present too." So Sir Richard made 100 good bows, and his wife and her ladies made 100 times 20 good arrows. 1 year from the day the knight had seen Robin Hood, he went to see him again. He took the 400 pieces of gold, and the bows and the arrows, and he went into the greenwood.
Little John and the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Meanwhile, Little John went to shoot in a tournament with other men for a gold and silver arrow. He shot very well. His arrows all hit the mark. The Sheriff of Nottingham gave him the gold and silver arrow. This is the best bowman I ever saw, the sheriff thought. Young man, he said to Little John, what is your name, and where are you from? Men call me, Reynold Greenleaf, said Little John, and I'm from Holderness. Well, Reynold Greenleaf, said the proud sheriff, will you be my man? I will give you good food and clothes, a good horse, and 15 pieces of gold a year. I'm the servant of a good knight, said Little John, but if he says yes, I'll work for you. Sir Richard was working in his castle and on his land, and he didn't need Little John. And Robin Hood laughed when John said, I'll be the worst servant the proud sheriff ever had. So Little John became the sheriff's man. One Wednesday, the sheriff went into Sherwood Forest to shoot deer. He thought that Reynold Greenleaf was with his men, but Little John was in bed. After a time, Little John went to the kitchen, took some food, and sat down to eat it. The sheriff's cook found him there. The cook was a strong man and afraid of nobody. You take food from my kitchen, he shouted. Take that! And he hit Little John very hard. Little John jumped up with his sword, but the cook took a sword too. They fought for an hour. You're one of the best swordsmen I ever met, said Little John, breathing hard. If you were as good with a bow, you could come to the greenwood with me. Robin Hood would be glad to see you. Robin Hood, cried the cook. Reynold Greenleaf. Are you Little John? I've heard of you. Stop fighting, and we'll be friends. I hate the sheriff. They sat down, and the cook brought out the best food and drink in the sheriff's kitchen. Then they went to the sheriff's strong room and broke the great doors. There were gold and silver cups and other things, and money, 303 pieces of gold. They took all these things and went to Robin's greenwood tree. Welcome, said Robin to Little John, and welcome to the good yeoman you've brought with you. What's happening in Nottingham? The sheriff sends you presents. Here they are. His cook, and his best cups and other things, and 303 pieces of gold. I'd like to thank the sheriff, said Robin. Would you? Said Little John. And he ran into the greenwood and found the sheriff. Where have you been, Reynold Greenleaf? Asked the sheriff. I've been to look for deer for you, and I've found the greatest one in the forest. Will you come with me and see? The sheriff rode his horse, and Little John ran, and they were soon at Robin's greenwood tree. "Here is the greatest one in the forest," said Little John, and he went down on his knee in front of Robin Hood. "Welcome, Sheriff," said Robin. "You must eat with us here." The proud sheriff was very angry, but he sat down, and Robin's men brought the food and drink in the sheriff's best gold and silver things. When he saw them, the sheriff couldn't eat anything. "Let me go," said the sheriff. "Let me go, and I'll be the best friend you ever had." "Will you promise," said Robin, "to be my friend, and not to try to catch or kill me? And will you promise to help my men if you see them?" "I promise." Little John took the sheriff to the road, and then went back to the greenwood tree.
Robin Hood and Friar Tuck.
One beautiful June day, Robin Hood and his merry men were in the forest. They saw a big deer, but it was more than 150 meters away. Little John shot an arrow at it from his big bow, and the deer fell dead. "That was a good shot, Little John," said Much the miller's son. "Yes," said Robin Hood. "If we travelled 100 miles, we wouldn't find a better bowman." Will Scarlet laughed. "There's a curtal friar at Fountains Abbey," he said. "His name is Friar Tuck, and he is a better bowman than any of us." "Is that true?" said Robin. "Then I won't eat and I won't drink before I see Friar Tuck." Robin Hood put an iron cap on his head. He put his sword at his side. Then, with his bow in his hand, he went to Fountains Dale. In Fountains Dale, beside the river, he saw the curtal friar. Friar Tuck had an iron cap on his head and a sword at his side. Robin Hood called out, "Carry me across the river, Friar Tuck, if you want to stay alive." The friar took Robin on his back and carried him across the river. He said nothing to him all the way. Robin jumped down from the friar's back. Friar Tuck quickly drew his sword. "Now, young man," he said, "carry me back over the river, or you'll be sorry." Robin Hood took Friar Tuck on his back and carried him across the river. He said nothing to him all the way. This time it was Robin who drew his sword. "Carry me over the river, Friar Tuck, if you want to stay alive." The friar took Robin on his back again. He said nothing to him before they were halfway across the river. And there, in the deepest part, he threw Robin into the water and fell on top of him. He was a very heavy man. After that, there was a great sword fight. From 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, they fought with their swords. Robin Hood was a very good swordsman, but Friar Tuck was just as good. At last, Robin said, "Oh, can we stop this for a minute? I must sound my horn." The fight stopped, and Robin Hood sounded his horn 3 times. "50 yeomen, with their bows ready, came running down to the river. "What men are these?" asked Friar Tuck. "They are my men," said Robin Hood. "Well, I don't have a horn, and I don't have 50 bowmen. But let me put 2 fingers in my mouth. Then we'll see what happens." Friar Tuck put 2 fingers in his mouth and sent out a very loud, high sound. 50 great dogs came running to the friar. 2 of them went at once to Robin Hood. They took his coat of Lincoln green in their teeth and tore it off him. The outlaws couldn't shoot the dogs that were round Robin Hood. The friar had taught all his dogs to catch arrows in their mouths. Only Little John's arrows flew too fast for them. "Call your dogs away," shouted Little John. "Call them away, or I'll kill them. And you." And he began to shoot. 10 of the friar's great dogs were soon wounded or dead. "Stop, good yeoman," said Friar Tuck. "Whose man are you?" "I am Little John, Robin Hood's man. You must stop fighting and be his friend." Friar Tuck had kept Fountain's Dale for 7 years. No knight or lord had fought with him and won. "I'll stop," he said, and he called his great dogs away. "But what do you want?" Robin Hood answered, "I want you to come with us to Sherwood Forest. You can live with us and be our outlaw friar. You'll get 1 gold piece every month and new clothes 3 times a year." And that is how the outlaws got their own friar.
How the abbot's money came back to Robin Hood.
1 year from the day Sir Richard of the Lee borrowed 400 pieces of gold, Robin Hood was waiting for him. He sent his 3 best bowmen to meet the knight, Little John, and Much the miller's son, and Will Scarlet. They didn't meet Sir Richard, but they met a fat churchman, a monk. "Ah," said Little John, "do you think this monk is bringing the borrowed money? Have your longbows ready." There were 52 fighting men with the monk, and 7 strong horses carried his things. 2 boys led the horses. Little John, Much, and Will Scarlet held their great bows with arrows ready. "Stop!" cried Little John. "Who are you?" the monk asked. "We are Robin Hood's men." When the 52 fighting men heard the name, they ran. Only the 2 boys stayed with the monk. Robin's men took the monk and his horses to Robin Hood. "Welcome, friend," said Robin Hood. "Where are you from?" From the Abbey of St. Mary." "Do you have 400 pieces of gold that my friend Sir Richard of the Lee paid to your abbot?" asked Robin. "No," said the monk. "I have only 15 pieces of gold, not a penny more." "If that is all you have," said Robin, "I won't take a penny, and if you need more, you can have it. But Little John must see." Little John looked in the monk's bags. "It's right," he said. "He has only 15 pieces of gold. added to the money the abbot has sent us. The abbot is very kind. He has sent the 400 pieces of gold the knight borrowed from us, and 400 more. I have counted 815 pieces of gold. Thank your abbot, said Robin Hood. We will keep the 800 pieces of gold, and poor people will be very glad to have it. Take your 15 pieces. I won't take a penny of that. The monk rode away, very angry. Before night fell, Sir Richard of the Lea came to the greenwood tree. "I am here, Robin Hood," he said. "I have brought the 400 pieces of gold that I borrowed from you." Robin Hood said, "The Abbot of St. Mary has paid it for you. I won't take it from you as well as from him. That wouldn't be fair. Take back your money and help poor people with it." He told Sir Richard about the monk, and the knight laughed. "I know a lot of poor people, sick yeomen and women and children who need money," he said. "Help them," said Robin, "and if you want more money for them, tell me. We can always get more from rich lords and rich churchmen. But tell me, what are those bows and all those arrows for?" "They are a present for you and your merry men. My wife and her ladies made the arrows, so they will be good." "Thank you," said Robin, "and if ever you need help, sound your horn 3 times, like this." Robin Hood sounded his own horn 3 times, and 100 men in Lincoln Green came running through the forest.
Robin Hood and Maid Marian.
Some say that Robin Hood was the son of the Earl of Huntingdon. As a boy, Robin lived in his father's castle until his father was killed by the Sheriff of Nottingham. Not very far away from the Earl of Huntingdon's castle, Lord Fitzwater had a castle. Between the 2 castles there was a forest. The Earl of Huntingdon's son, Robin, and Lord Fitzwater's daughter, Marian, often met in the forest. The boy and the girl became friends. Marian was a pretty girl, but she was also strong. She could use a bow nearly as well as Robin, and he had taught her to use a quarterstaff. It was a very sad day for Maid Marian when the Sheriff of Nottingham took the Earl of Huntingdon's castle and made young Robin leave it. For a few years she heard nothing about Robin. Then one day she heard 2 men talking about the outlaws of Sherwood Forest. "There are more than 100 of them," one man said. "They shoot the king's deer, and they take money from the rich." "Yes," said his friend, "but they give that money to the poor, and they never take anything from women or from poor people or good yeomen. They have a fine leader. His name is Robin Hood, and he is the friend of all good country people." "They say," the first man added, "that there is no better bowman in the country." Maid Marian thought about their words. "It sounds like my Robin. I'll go and see this Robin Hood." She put a boy's clothes on, with a green hood that hid her hair and most of her face. Then, with her bow and arrows and a strong quarterstaff, she left Lord Fitzwater's castle. Nobody saw her go. A few days after that, Marion was in Sherwood Forest. She was very hungry, and she was glad to see a nice fat deer. With an arrow on the string of her bow, she began to move very quietly through the trees towards the deer. "Boy," said a loud voice, "what are you doing?" Away went the deer. Marion turned quickly. The man whose loud voice had driven away her food was quite near her. He had a big quarterstaff, but he was not carrying a bow, and he had no sword. She couldn't see his face because he was wearing a big hood. He looked very strong, but Marion was angry with him. "You saw what I was doing," she said, "and you have driven my deer away." "These are the king's deer, boy. You mustn't shoot them. Go away." "I won't go away," said Marion. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of any man who hides his face." She dropped her bow and went towards him with her quarterstaff. The man laughed and took his quarterstaff in both hands. It was a good fight. The man was very strong, and his quarterstaff flew through the air very fast. But it was clear that he didn't want to hurt the boy. His staff often touched Marion, but never hit her really hard. She could move very quickly. Marion's staff travelled fast, too. The man had to use his staff quickly to stop Marion's, and sometimes she was too quick for him, and he got a good bang on the head. At last, the man said, "Let's stop. I'll say I'm sorry about your deer. I like you. You're very young, but you're going to be a fine fighter. Will you come and be one of Robin Hood's merry men?" Marion threw back her hood. The man stood quite still. Then he threw back his own hood. "Robin!" cried Marion. Robin Hood looked at the lovely face and hair of the woman who, as a young girl, had been his little friend. Robin Hood and Maid Marian came to Robin's greenwood tree. Will Scarlet was there. "Where's Friar Tuck?" Robin asked. "He's gone into the forest to pray," said Will Scarlet, laughing. "He took his bow and arrows with him." "Please find him and bring him here," said Robin. Some men ran to find the friar. They soon came back with him. He was carrying a fat deer on his back. "These men say you want me," he said to Robin Hood. "They stopped my prayers, and I hope there was a good reason for that." "Yes," said Robin. "Maid Marian and I want you to marry us. Here. Now." "Maid?" said Friar Tuck. "I don't see a lady here." Maid Marian threw back her hood again, and they all saw a beautiful woman's head above the boy's clothes. Friar Tuck and Robin Hood's merry men shouted in happy surprise. And that is how Robin Hood and Maid Marian were married in the greenwood. They lived happily there for many years.
Robin Hood and the Butcher.
One day, Robin Hood saw a man riding through the forest. He was on a big horse with a big basket on each side. "Good morning," said Robin. "I like to see a happy man in the forest. Tell me what your work is and where you live." The man answered, "I'm not going to tell you where I live, but I'm a butcher. My baskets are full of meat, and I'm going to Nottingham to sell it." "Oh, I would like to be a butcher," said Robin Hood. "How much do you want for your meat and your horse?" "If you want my meat and my horse, you must pay me 2 pieces of gold for them." Robin Hood gladly paid the butcher the money. Then he rode the butcher's horse to Nottingham. When other butchers began to sell their meat, Robin began to sell his. Soon the other butchers found that they couldn't sell any meat. Robin was selling more meat for a penny than they could sell for 5. So they said to each other, "This is a foolish young man who has sold his father's land. He isn't a real butcher." The other butchers wanted to know more about Robin Hood, so they went to him and said, "We're all butchers, and we must be friends. Will you have dinner with us?" At that time, the butchers always had dinner in the hall of the Sheriff of Nottingham, and the other butchers took Robin Hood there. "Bring lots to drink," said Robin. "I'll pay for it all, even if it adds up to 5 pieces of gold or more. Drink, my friends, drink." "He's a fool," the other butchers said. The sheriff thought, "This is the son of a rich farmer. He has sold his land for silver and gold, and he wants to live foolishly. I'll get something from the fool." Then to Robin he said, "Do you have any horned beasts that you will sell to me?" "Yes, a lot," said Robin, 200 or 300. "And I have a lot of land, good free land. Would you like to see my land and my beasts? They are mine, just as they were my father's and his father's before him. But I can sell them if you want to buy them." The Sheriff of Nottingham took 300 pieces of gold. He rode with Robin to see the horned beasts and the land. Robin led the way into Sherwood Forest. "Is this the way?" said the sheriff. "God save us from the man they call Robin Hood." A little further along the forest road, Robin Hood saw about 100 good red deer. They came near, and Robin said, "How'd you like my horned beasts? They look good and fat, don't they?" "I don't like this," said the sheriff, "and I don't like you. I'm going back to Nottingham." Robin Hood sounded his horn 3 times. Little John came running through the trees at the head of all Robin Hood's merry men. "What must we do, Robin Hood?" asked Little John. "I've brought the Sheriff of Nottingham here to have dinner with us." "He is welcome," said Little John. "I know he has a lot of gold, so he will gladly pay for his dinner. A lot of poor people will have good dinners that the sheriff's gold will buy." Little John counted out 300 pieces of gold from the sheriff's bag. But the sheriff didn't want to stay to have dinner. So Robin Hood led the sheriff through the greenwood to the road. "Goodbye, kind sheriff," said Robin, and he laughed as the sheriff rode away.
Robin Hood and Alan a Dale.
Robin Hood and Maid Marian were standing under a tree in the greenwood when a young man came along the forest road. The young man was good to see in his new red clothes. His face was happy, and he was singing merrily. Next morning, Robin and Marian saw the same young man. He had thrown away his red clothes, He wasn't singing, and his face was very sad. Little John and Much the miller's son came out from among the trees and stood in front of the young man. Little John said, "We don't want to hurt you. Just come and speak to our leader under that greenwood tree." The young man came and stood unhappily in front of Robin Hood. Robin spoke kindly to him. "Do you have any money that you don't need? We know a lot of people that need it." Very sadly, the young man said, "I have only 10 pence and a gold ring. The ring was for a beautiful young woman. I was going to marry her today, but they have taken her away from me. They are going to marry her to a rich old knight. I don't want to live without her. Take my 10 pence and let me die." "Tell me your name," said Robin Hood. "My name is Allen a Dale." "And you have no money," said Robin Hood. "So what will you give me to get her back for you?" "I am Robin Hood." "I have no money, Robin Hood, but I will promise to be your very good servant. I'll be your man for as long as you need me." "How far away is your lady love's home, and where is the marriage to be?" "Her home is an hour's walking from here. The marriage is to be at the church near her home in an hour." Robin Hood ran with Allen a Dale and some of his men. They didn't stop, and they got to the church before anybody. Allen a Dale and the outlaws hid, and only Robin went into the church. He took a harp with him, and he waited. A fat churchman came into the church. "What are you doing here?" he asked Robin. "I'm a harper," said Robin. "I'm the best harper in the north of England." "Oh, welcome," said the churchman. "I love harp music. What will you play for me?" Just then, a rich knight came into the church. He was old and ugly and fat. A very pretty young woman came and stood unhappily beside him. "This isn't right," cried Robin Hood. "This young woman mustn't marry that old man. It isn't fair. But I came to make music. Listen." But they didn't hear Robin's harp. They heard him sound his horn 3 times. 24 brave bowmen came running to the church, and Allen a Dale brought Robin's bow and gave it to him. The bowmen stood round the people in church with arrows ready. The pretty young woman ran to Allen a Dale, and he held her in his arms. "Marry them," Robin said to the churchman. "It's not right," the churchman said. "By the laws of the church and by the laws of England, the people in church must be asked 3 times. Only then can a man and woman be married." Robin Hood pulled off the churchman's coat, and he put it on Little John. "Now you are a churchman, Little John. Do what must be done." Little John stood in front of the people in the church. He was a very big man, and the people began to laugh. He asked them 7 times. 3 times doesn't seem very much," he said. And then, "Who gives this woman to Allen a Dale?" Little John asked. "I do," said Robin Hood. "And if anybody takes her away from Allen a Dale, he'll have to answer to me." So Allen a Dale was married to his lady love. She looked beautiful in her happiness, and they all went back to the greenwood to live free in the forest air.
Robin Hood and the Fat Monks.
Robin Hood put on the clothes of a friar and went to the forest road. A friar should be poor. He should get his food by asking kind people for it. So Robin looked poor in his friar's clothes. 2 big, fat, strong monks came along the forest road on good, strong horses. They looked pleased to be alive. "Good morning," Robin Hood said to them. "Can you give me a penny to buy some bread? Nobody has given me anything today, not a bit of bread or a cup of water. Please give me something." "Ah," the fat monk said, "we're sorry for you, but we don't have even a penny. If we had a penny, we would give it to you." Brave Robin Hood laughed. "I'm afraid that isn't true," he said. "I'll try to show you that it isn't true." The fat monks kicked their horses and began to ride away as fast as they could. But Robin could run very fast. He soon caught them, and he pulled them both off their horses. "Ah! Don't hurt us! Don't hurt us!" the fat monks cried. "No, no, I won't hurt you," said Robin Hood. "I won't hurt you. You don't have any money, and so I am sorry for you. Listen, this is what we must do. We want money, all 3 of us. So we'll go down on our knees on the grass here, all 3 of us, and we'll pray. We'll ask heaven to send us some money. Pray!" The fat monks couldn't say no. They quickly went down on their knees. "Send us, ooh, send us," they prayed. "Some money for our need." They prayed very unhappily. Sometimes they cried. Robin Hood prayed too, but he didn't pray unhappily. Very happily he sang, "Send us, oh, send us some money for our need." The 3 of them prayed like that on the grass for an hour. "Now," said Robin, "let's see how much money heaven has sent us for our need. We must be fair about this. If one of us has more than the others, he mustn't keep it for himself." The 2 monks put their hands in their pockets. "Oh, nothing. Oh, how sad. Nothing." "Nothing?" said Robin Hood. "Nothing? After all that praying? But heaven is good. I must help you to look." And he looked carefully. There were gold pieces hidden in their clothes. Robin counted 500 gold pieces onto the grass. "Oh, well prayed," he said. "You have prayed so well that each of you must have some of this gold." He gave them 50 pieces of gold each. He kept 400 pieces of gold for the poor. The fat monks didn't dare to say anything. They got up from their knees. They wanted to go, but Robin said, "Wait! This is heaven's own place, where heaven sent us gold. You must make promises in a place like this. Promise that you will never say anything untrue again." They promised. "Promise that you will not keep your money when poor people need it." They promised. Then Robin Hood helped them to get on their horses and go. Robin went back to the greenwood, and he laughed all the way.
Robin Hood in Nottingham.
The Sheriff of Nottingham hated Robin Hood. How can I catch him? He thought. I must think. He is the best bowman in the land. I'll send out word that there will be shooting on a day in June, with fair play for the bowmen. The best bowman will get a gold arrow from me. Robin Hood will come and shoot, because I have promised that there will be fair play. And then I'll take him. He got fighting men from all his friends, 200 horsemen, 300 bowmen, and 100 others. Robin Hood heard about the shooting. "Get ready," he said to his men. "We'll go to Nottingham, and 4 of us will shoot." 140 strong young men went with Robin. The Sheriff of Nottingham saw only 3 of Robin's men, Little John, Much the miller's son, and Will Scarlet. They shot well, better than any of the bowmen from other places, but the best was Robin Hood. Every arrow from his bow hit the mark. The gold arrow was his, and he took it from the sheriff with many thanks. The sheriff held up his hand to his swordsmen, and they ran to take Robin. But then they stopped. More than 100 bowmen with arrows ready stood out from among the people. "Don't you remember your promise?" Robin said to the sheriff. "Under my greenwood tree you promised to be my friend." Some of the sheriff's men began to run away, but some of them stayed. A fight began. An arrow hit Little John's knee and wounded him badly. "Please, Robin," he said, "don't let the sheriff take me alive. Kill me with your sword and leave me dead." "Never," said Robin, and he took the big man on his back. All the way from Nottingham to the Lee he carried Little John. Sometimes he had to put him on the ground to shoot at the men who came after them. Then he took him up again and went on. They came to a strong castle just inside the forest. It was Sir Richard's castle, and the knight welcomed Robin Hood and all his men. "I'm not afraid of the Sheriff of Nottingham," he said. "Come in, and we'll shut up the castle and shoot from the walls."
Robin Hood saves Sir Richard of the Lee.
The Sheriff of Nottingham got more men from his friends. He led them to the castle of Sir Richard of the Lee. "You are helping the king's enemies," he shouted to Sir Richard. "You must let me come into your castle to take them." "I don't know that my friends are the king's enemies," Sir Richard answered. "You can't come into my castle. We must know what the king says." The sheriff rode hard to London. He told the king about Sir Richard, about Robin Hood, and about the brave bowman. "This Robin Hood is an outlaw," he said. "He and his men shoot your deer in the forest. They take money from lords and good churchmen. They are your enemies, and we must stop them." "In 2 weeks," said the king, "I will be in Nottingham. I will take Robin Hood myself, and I will take Sir Richard of the Lee. Ride back now to Nottingham, and get bowmen from all the country round." Meanwhile, the sheriff's men left their places round the castle and went back to Nottingham. So Robin Hood and his men went into the greenwood. The Sheriff of Nottingham wanted to catch Robin, but he couldn't. "I can't catch Robin Hood," he thought. "But I can catch Sir Richard of the Lee if he comes out of his castle." The sheriff sent a man to the knight's castle. "I come from Robin Hood," said this man. "He needs you. Please come to help him. I'll lead you." And that is how the Sheriff of Nottingham caught Sir Richard of the Lee. With a lot of soldiers, he took the knight along the road to Nottingham. A woman saw them go, and she ran into the greenwood and found Robin Hood. "Robin Hood!" she cried. "They have taken Sir Richard of the Lee." "Who has taken him?" asked Robin. "The Sheriff of Nottingham." Robin Hood sounded his horn, and more than 100 men in Lincoln Green came running through the trees. "Will you come with me to Nottingham to save Sir Richard of the Lee?" They ran through the greenwood and over the fields, their bows in their hands, their arrows on their backs, and their swords at their sides. They ran into Nottingham, and there, in front of them, they saw the Sheriff of Nottingham. All his soldiers were with him, and Sir Richard of the Lee. "Stop, proud sheriff!" shouted Robin. "Stop and speak to me. Tell me what the king said to you in London." "I don't speak to outlaws," said the sheriff, and to the soldiers he said, "Take that man!" But the soldiers saw 100 arrows in 100 bows all round them, and not a man moved. "I have never run so far or so fast," said Robin Hood, "and I tell you, Sheriff, it is not to do you good." An arrow flew from Robin's bow, and the sheriff fell dead. "You must come with us to the greenwood, Sir Knight, and you must stay with us for a time. When the king gives us his pardon, you will have your castle and your lands again."
The King and Robin Hood.
The king came to Nottingham with a great number of knights. He came to take Robin Hood and Sir Richard of the Lee. "If any man brings me Sir Richard's head," the king said, "I promise to give him Sir Richard's castle and all his lands." There was a good old knight who heard that, and he said, "My lord the king, do not give Sir Richard's lands to any man, if you like that man. Nobody in this country can have the knight's lands if Robin Hood is alive and can carry a bow." "Then we must kill Robin Hood first, mustn't we?" said the king. The king stayed in Nottingham for many weeks, but nobody could find Robin Hood. Nobody knew where he was, or if they did know, they didn't say. At last, one of the king's foresters said, "My lord the king, if you want to see Robin Hood, this is what you must do. Take 5 of your best knights and go down to the abbey near the river. Get monk's clothes there, and then take the road to Nottingham. I'll lead you. Before you get to Nottingham, you will meet Robin Hood, if he is alive." The king put on the clothes of a rich abbot with a big hat over his hood. His 5 knights dressed as churchmen too. Then, With horses carrying great bags, they started through the forest. They hadn't gone far in the greenwood when they met Robin Hood, and a few good bowmen with him. Robin took the king's horse. "Sir Abbot," he said, "please stay for a time. We are yeomen of this forest. We live by shooting the king's deer, and we have no other way of living. But you have churches and money from the people and gold. Please give us some of your riches to give to poor people." The king answered him, "I have only 40 pieces of gold. I have been with the king in Nottingham, and that took a lot of my money. If I had 100 pieces of gold, I would gladly give you 50 for the poor." Robin took the 40 pieces of gold and gave half to Little John. Then he gave half back. "Take this, Sir Abbot," he said. "You will need it. We'll meet again." "Thank you," said the king. "But I bring a word from our lord the king. Look, this is his ring. He asks you to come to Nottingham to have dinner with him." When Robin saw the king's ring, he went down on his knee. "I love no man in the world," he said, "so well as I love my king. Thank you, Sir Abbot, for your words, and today you must have dinner with me under my greenwood tree." And he led the king there. The king saw men working to make food ready. "Are these all your men?" he asked. Robin sounded his horn 3 times, and 100 young men in Lincoln Green came running and stood in lines in front of Robin. "I like this," the king thought. "He rules his men better than I can rule mine." The dinner was soon ready. Good deer meat, fine bread, and good drink. The king ate and drank well. "Now, Sir Abbot," said Robin, "you must see how we play." He and his men jumped up with their bows in their hands. "Are they going to shoot me?" the king asked himself. Then very quickly they put up 2 marks for shooting. "The marks are small and 50 meters away," the king thought. "Can they hit them as far away as that?" Then, 2 at a time, they shot arrows at the marks. If a man's arrow didn't hit the mark, he had to go on one knee and take his hood off. Then the other man hit him as hard as he could on the head. The last man to shoot was Robin himself. 4 times his arrow went straight to the mark. But the light wasn't so good now, and his last arrow didn't hit the mark. Robin went on one knee in front of the king and pulled his hood off. "Sir Abbot," he said, "I haven't hit the mark, so somebody must hit me. Will you do it?" "I don't want to hurt a good yeoman," said the king. "Don't be afraid to hurt me," said Robin. The good king took off his coat and hood to free his arm. Then he hit Robin so hard that he fell to the ground. "Phew! You are strong, Sir Abbot," Robin laughed. "Can you shoot well too?" But then he saw Sir Richard of the Lee. Sir Richard was on his knee in front of the king. He had seen the king's face. Robin saw too. "My lord the King of England, now I know you." All the outlaws went on their knees. Robin Hood said, "I ask your pardon, my lord the king, for me and my men. We are your true servants. Will you pardon us?" "Yes," said the king. "I have been learning about you. That is why I came here, and now I know about you. I pardon you if you will leave the greenwood, you and all your men, and come and live with me in London. I need men like you around me." "I'll come to London with you," and I'll bring 100 men. But if I'm not happy there, I'll have to come back to the greenwood and shoot more of your deer.
Robin Hood goes to London.
Do you have any green cloth to sell me? Asked the king. He and all his knights were soon dressed in Lincoln green. Then the king and his knights, with Robin Hood and his merry men, went to Nottingham. The people of Nottingham saw a great number of men in green. Our king is dead, they thought, and Robin Hood has come to town. He has had enemies here, and he has come to punish us. They began to run away. The king laughed. Come back, good people of Nottingham, he shouted. Are you afraid of your king? The people were glad when they saw the king. They brought food and drink. Then they all, king, knights, townspeople and outlaws, ate and drank and sang happily. Before the king went to London, he sent for Sir Richard of the Lee. You have your castle and your lands again, the king said. Stay here and help my people. Robin Hood stayed in London for a year. It was not a happy year for him. The king was kind, and the lords and knights listened to him and liked him. But London town was not the greenwood that Robin loved. At the end of the year, only 2 of his men were still with Robin Hood in London, Little John and Will Scarlet. The others had come one by one to Robin and said, I love you, Robin, but the town is not for me. I want to go back to the greenwood and the open air and the trees. And Robin Hood had said to each of them, I know. Go back and be happy. Help the poor and the old and all women. Goodbye. At last, Robin Hood himself went to the king. My lord the king, he said, I must go to the church in Barnesdale. I go there every year to ask pardon for the wrong I have done. It's right to do that, said the king. Go to Barnesdale, but come back to see me when you can. When Robin got to the greenwood on a fine sunny morning, he heard the merry singing of the birds. It's a long time since I was here, he thought. I must shoot a deer to remember old times. He shot a very big deer, and then he sounded his horn. All the outlaws in the forest knew that sound, and soon 100 fine young men came through the trees. They went down on their knees to Robin. Welcome, they cried. Welcome to our dear Robin Hood under the greenwood tree.
The death of Robin Hood.
Robin Hood and Maid Marian grew old at last. Maid Marian died first, and Robin was alone. I can't shoot well, he said to Little John. My arrows don't fly so straight. I think I'm ill. I'll go to the priory in Kirklees, the house of women who work for the church. The head of that house, the prioress, is my aunt's daughter, and she will know how to make me well. Don't go, said Little John. Don't go without 50 of your best bowmen. But Robin said, I don't want you or anybody to go with me. The prioress and the other women in the priory are the servants of God, and they won't hurt me. So, Robin Hood went alone to Kirklees and called at the strong black door. The prioress came down to see him. "Yes," she said, "you are ill. You have too much blood in your body, and I must take some of it out." She took Robin Hood to a little room. She drove a small pointed iron into his arm, and the good red blood began to come out. She stayed with him for an hour, and then for another hour. She didn't stop the blood, and at last Robin knew that she wanted to kill him. She was working for his enemies. The prioress went out of the room. Robin's blood was still running out. He tried to stop it, but he couldn't. He tried to open the door, but the prioress had locked it. The window was high up, and he was too weak to get to it. His horn was at his side, and he sounded it 3 times. The sound was very weak, but Little John heard it. He was under a tree just outside Kirklees. The big man ran to the priory. He broke the strong black door, and he broke other doors inside. At last he broke the door of Robin's room. Robin was near to death. "Oh, Robin, Robin," cried Little John. "This is a bad place. I'll carry you out, and then I'll come back and burn Kirklees to the ground, and all the bad women in it." "No, Little John," said Robin. "You mustn't do that for me. I'm dying, but I never hurt a woman in my life. Don't hurt even the prioress. But give me my bow and a good arrow. I'll shoot the arrow through the window, and you can bury me in the ground where the arrow falls. Bury me with green grass under my head and green grass at my feet. Bury my long bow at my side, and put these words above me: Here lies brave Robin Hood.